these are called closed passage, right? So we saw this in our very first English class, in very first verbal ability class, where a paragraph is given and 2 or 3 blanks are given. So what you're expected to do is go through the entire paragraph, try and understand the author's intent, and then try and look to fill up the words from the answer options given. So these are 3 different questions, right? So in a closed passage you will find a lot of questions, not just a single question but a lot of questions. So go through the paragraph, try and understand what the author is trying to say, and then try and look at the answer options. Let's do this exercise for 3 minutes. So here there is a word called nebulous. Nebulous literally means cloudy. So something which is not very clear, confused. So do you guys go through the question? I'm looking for 3 answer options. The first question, second question, and the third question. Any answers? So Akash, you gave me 3. So it's not like there is only one option, right? So this one here, the answer will be one of regrettably or firstly or obviously or apparently. Similarly, in this second blank, you either have quantitatively or systematically or scientifically or analytically. And for the third blank, you have either implications or disadvantages or utility or alternatives, right? So I'm looking for 3 fill in the blanks. I'm looking for 3 words that will fill in those 3 blanks. Alright, so I assume that everyone's gone through the question. Let's discuss it now. So it starts off with a blank. Dash such a model reflects major simplifications of the way divisions are made in the real world. Divisions, right? So you probably have to remember this. It's probably important. Humans are not able to process information as quickly and effectively as the model assumes. They tend not to think dash as easily as a model calls for. They often deal with a particular option without really assessing its dash, and when they do assess alternatives, they may be extremely nebulous about their criteria of evaluation. I will go through the understanding and everything in a bit, but by looking at this, you clearly have the answer for the third one, right? Without really assessing its dash, and when they do assess alternatives, that means here it clearly has to be alternatives. So the third one is alternatives for sure. It can't be anything else but that, right? But let's look at the others as well. So having gone through the entire paragraph, having understood what is he trying to say here, he's saying such a model reflects major simplifications of the way divisions are made in the real world, right? So humans are not able to process information as quickly and effectively as the model assumes. So you're talking about processing some kind of information in a quick and effective manner. They tend not to think. So you're talking about processing information quickly, divisions. So you're talking about doing something in a quantitative fashion, right? You are talking about divisions, which is again something to do with quantitative analysis. You're talking about processing information in a quick and effective manner. So you're talking about thinking quantitatively. Model is asking you to think quantitatively but not able to do it quickly or effectively. In the first blank, you can't say firstly because there is no other thing to say. Firstly this, then secondly that, etc. Right? And excuse me. Regrettably. So is something sad happening here? No, I mean he's only talking about what is happening in the world without really having any emotion towards it. So you can't say regrettably, that is sadly, right? Between obviously and apparently, right? So when would you say apparently? You would say apparently when you say it seems like this, it apparently is like this, but actually it is something else, right? So apparently again doesn't make sense because you're not talking about 2 different cases here. You're not saying this is apparently is something that you probably can see at a surface level, whereas if you dig deeper you'll see another thing, right? But you're not talking about 2 different kinds of things here, right? So probably obviously try using that. Obviously such a model reflects major simplifications of the way divisions are made in the real world, right? So does this make sense if you put obviously here? Obviously such a model, whatever that model is, it reflects major simplifications of the way divisions are made. Now this makes sense because from there on you're saying that humans are not able to process information and they don't think quantitatively and they don't assess alternatives. So obviously it's not the true picture, it's a major simplified version, right? That model is a major simplified version of the actual thing, right? So obviously it would make sense because then he's going on to explain why it is a simplification, because humans really can't catch up with the model. They can't process information, they can't think quantitatively, and they can't assess alternatives. So obviously it's a major simplification of the way divisions are made in the real world, right? So I would say the third one was a dead giveaway. It's very easy. The second one was also pretty easy. The first one probably at a medium to difficult level of difficulty. Again, take 3 minutes, try and get this. Alright, so have you gone through this one? I don't see any answers coming just yet. Any guesses, guys? Or do we begin? Alright, let's start now. In a large company, dash people is about as common as using a gun or a switchblade to dash an argument. As a result, most managers have little or no experience of firing people, and they find it emotionally traumatic. As a result, they often delay the act interminably, much as an unhappy spouse will prolong a bad marriage. And when the firing is done, it is often done clumsily, with far worse side effects than are necessary. Do the world-class software organizations have a different way of firing people? No, but they do the deed swiftly, humanely, and professionally. The key point here is to view the fired employee as a failed product and to ask how the process dashed such a phenomenon in the first place. Right? So 5 minutes ago when we just saw the first question, I told you that you have to go through the entire paragraph and then start looking at the answer options. You would have understood why by now, right? So by the time I completed the paragraph, I know the answer for the first one is 3. It's not punishing or dismissing or admonishing. Admonishing is scolding somebody for a wrongdoing, right? So if someone does something wrong and you scold him for that, it's called admonishing. But here clearly if you go through the entire paragraph, you realize that he's talking about firing people, right? And he's saying it is about as common as using a gun or a switchblade to dash an argument. So what will you do with an argument? Do you defeat or close an argument? No, you resolve. There will be arguments, and you, in an office situation, you actually try and resolve arguments. That is, you try and come to a common consensus, right? You know what defeat and close is. What is thwarting? Thwarting is preventing, right? So these two are pretty straightforward. The last one. The key point here is to view the fired employee as a failed product and to ask how the process dashed such a phenomenon in the first place. How it actually allowed such a thing to happen in the first place. Right? So process doesn't produce a phenomenon. Right? So how did the process actually allow such a thing? How did because we have an entire process for it, how did a failed product happen? Right? So it's not derived or engineered or produced. Right? The product has not been produced or engineered or derived, but it was allowed. Right? So what was allowed? An employee, a wrong employee has been hired. So when you have such a process and when you have such a phenomenon, how did it happen? Right? So a failed product is a phenomenon. So how did such a thing happen when we have such an entire elaborate process? Right? So it is allowed. So it would be 3, 1 and 4. Alright, so let's discuss this one now. At that time, the White House was as serene. What is serene? Quiet, peaceful. Quiet and peaceful. As a resort hotel out of season. The corridors were dash. In the various offices, dash grey men in waistcoats talked to one another in low-pitched voices. The only color or caller is bad temper. Someone who gets angry very easily is said to be choleric. Curiously enough, was provided by President Eisenhower himself. Apparently, his dash was easily set off. He scowled. Scowled is to shout angrily when he dashed the corridors. Alright, so having understood the simple paragraph, let's try and answer the questions. At the time, the White House was as serene as a resort hotel out of season. The corridors were empty. You're talking about a hotel out of season. How will a hotel out of season look like? It will be empty. Also, if it is serene, which is quiet and peaceful, it will be empty, not white or hollow or striking. Right? Those don't make sense. In the various offices, grey men in waistcoats, they talk to each other in low-pitched voices. So these guys were they loud? Stentorian is again speaking in a loud, authoritative kind of a way. But these guys were speaking in low-pitched voices. So it is quiet. Right? Faded doesn't make sense in this conversation at all. It doesn't apply here. The only color or caller, curiously enough, was provided by President himself. Apparently his dash was, we're not talking about laughter or humor here, and definitely not talking about curiosity either. We're talking about his bad temper. Was set off. He scowled when he dashed the corridors. Strolling is when someone's having a happy or lazy kind of a walk, right? So you stroll down the park, right? So when you have nothing else to do, you just stroll. You just at a very easy pace, you just walk without, you walk aimlessly without any particular reason. That is strolling, but that is clearly not what he is doing there. Stormed. You don't say he stormed the corridors. You would say either he stormed in or stormed out the corridors. Right? So grammatically this doesn't make sense. You should have either said stormed in or stormed out. Prowled. Prowling is lions and tigers, they'll prowl the regions, right? So this guy, he would probably go through the corridors, but he wouldn't really be, he's not a watchman or a security guy that he'll keep prowling the corridors, right? He has better things to do. He'll sit in the office, and when he has to come out or go in, that is when he'll go through the corridors, right? So prowling doesn't make sense. He paced. Paced is to go from one place to another, right? Whenever he paced the corridors, he scowled when his temper was set off. So it is 3, 1, 4 and 1. Here there is a word given and there is a context given. So out of these 4 options, figure out which doesn't make sense, right? So 3 of these 4 words can be replaced by the given word there, but the 4th one will be a misfit. So which one is the misfit out of these 4 is what you have to figure out. This is a easy kind of a question because he has not just given you the word, he gave you a context as well. So even if you don't understand the word itself or you didn't know the word, you can very well try and deduce from the given context. You can figure out what he's trying to say. Alright, so let's go to the first question and see if you'll be able to understand this. A specious argument is not simply a false one, but one that has the ring of truth. So what is actually the meaning of specious is something that is very misleading, because it seems like the truth, but it's actually not the truth, right? So at a surface level, it seems convincing, but if you actually go a little deeper, you would figure out that this is a false argument. Right? So a specious argument is not simply a false one, but one that has a ring of truth. So deceitful, does it make sense? Yes, you're trying to deceive or trick someone or cheat someone. Fallacious argument is a clear synonym. A fallacious one is again a false argument. Credible is believable. So if you look at the tones, this is negative, this is negative, this is negative, this is positive. Deceptive is again negative. So the one thing that you can't replace it with there is C. That is credible. Right, so let's look at the next question. Try and tell me the answer for this. Alright, obviate. the new mass transit system may obviate the need for use of personal cars. So what do you understand? Even if you didn't know the word obviate, what can you understand from this? What it does is it actually prevents, right? Obviating is preventing something from happening, right? So preventing can be used. Forestall is again the same thing. It is to prevent or obstruct something from happening. Preclude is again try and avoiding something, whereas bolster is to strengthen, right? So this is your answer, right? So the other three mean more or less the same thing as preventing, whereas the last one, bolster, is to strengthen, right? So that doesn't make sense in that sentence, so that will be your answer. Next. Alright, so some words fall into disuse as technology makes objects obsolete. What is the meaning of the word obsolete? Something that is no longer useful. Something that is no longer useful, right? So disuse can be discarded. Obliterate is completely destroy. Obliterate is to destroy completely. Unfashionable, right? So all these are negative words. Prevalent is a positive word. What is prevalent? Something that is commonly seen. Prevalent is something that is commonly seen. So that is clearly not what we are talking about here, because some words will fall into disuse. That is, they will not be used anymore. You can't say that they are now commonly seen, right? That is the opposite. The answer is prevalent. So consider the second option as penurious and not frugal again, because it's already there in the first option. Alright, parsimonious. The evidence was constructed from very parsimonious scraps of information. Parsimonious is using very, usually used in the case of money, using it very economically. That is, someone who is, he may be rich but he doesn't want to spend, right? So that is parsimonious behavior. Someone is unwilling to spend money or anything, right? So that is parsimonious. Frugal also means the same thing, using less of something. Penurious is poor. Thrifty and frugal are synonyms along with parsimonious. Altruistic is your answer. Altruistic person is someone who is selfless. That is, someone who helps others before helping himself. That person is said to be an altruist, right? So that doesn't make sense in this particular sentence. Next. Alright, facetious. When I suggested that war is a method of controlling population, my father remarked that I was being facetious. Facetious is when I'm trying to make some light-hearted humor, right? So when I'm trying to not being serious, that is being facetious. So joking can be replaced, jocular can be replaced, jovial. All these three things mean the same thing, more or less, as facetious. Whereas jovian is something to do with Jupiter, right? Like people who are from Earth are called earthlings. Something to do with Jupiter is called Jovian, right? So that clearly doesn't make sense in this context. Jovian is your answer. Next. Alright, so I think again that the people who typed the questions, they forgot to demarcate. This is a different kind of question. Here you're trying to look for the word that is a good replacement, right? So you must find a word which can replace the word ostensible. Out of 4, only 1 will be suitable replacement. Alright, Manohar's ostensible job was to guard the building at night. So insidious is harmful or dangerous, doesn't make sense. Ostentatious is trying to show off, doesn't make sense. Blatant is again when you do something in a very unabashed way, that is no holds barred, right? So if you're doing something blatantly, then you're not trying to disguise it, you're doing it openly, right? So it doesn't make sense in this context. So it's apparent job, right? So ostensible and something apparent, these are synonyms. Both mean that something that looks like, right? So Manohar's ostensible job was to guard the building at night. His apparent job was to do this. So from here on, try and do the same thing. Try and replace the word with one of these four options. Alright, so the police officer appears oblivious. What is oblivious to something? Not mindful of. Not mindful of that. That means he is not really considering the fact. Right? So the police officer appears oblivious to the opprobrium generated by his blatant, open, partisan conduct. Partisan is biased. Right? So he's a police officer. He's supposed to be unbiased, but his conduct was openly biased. Right? So what will it generate if he is doing that? Harsh criticism is what opprobrium means. A severe criticism or a harsh criticism. Right? So when he's doing something openly, then you can't say distrust. You will not trust him at all. Right? So stark oppressiveness. What is oppressive behavior? Trying to be an authoritarian or Hitler kind of a tyrant kind of a behavior. Doesn't make sense here. Enmity, it won't really cause enmity, but it will definitely create this kind of a harsh criticism or censure will come into his records because he's being very openly biased in his conduct. Potent. Alright, so it appears to many that the US war on terrorism portends trouble in the Gulf. Portends is give a warning sign. Right, so introduces trouble, doesn't make sense. Evoke is to bring out. Evoke is to bring out, again, doesn't really make sense in this particular situation. So which one is it? Is it spells trouble or is it bodes trouble for in the Gulf? Which one would you go for and why? Foreboding is the same as portending, which is to give a warning sign. It doesn't bode well, or it bodes well, or it augurs well. All these words are signs for future. Boding, auguring, or portending, all of these things mean the same. Spells would be far more direct, right? It means that it is going to happen, whereas bode would seem more like it is like a warning sign, not really like it is definitely going to happen 100%, but it's a warning sign for the Gulf. The answer is C. Alright, so when a videotape of her meeting was played back to her and she was asked to explain her presence there, she started prevaricating. Prevaricate is to try walking in a crooked manner, right? So it's this is what it literally means. Pre is before and varicate is to walk around in a crooked manner before you can walk straight, right? So what it actually means is to speak in an evasive manner. When you're trying to avoid something, you're prevaricating. You're talking about everything else in a twisted manner so that you're not coming straight to the point, right? So that is prevaricating. Speaking evasively. When you're evading, you're avoiding, right? So speaking evasively is what prevarication is. Violently doesn't make sense. There should be in here tantrum. What is a tantrum? Trying to throw a fit against, right? So that again doesn't make sense. Lying furiously, not furiously but evasively. She's speaking in a evasive fashion. That is, she's trying to avoid the question. She's trying to divert the attention to something else, right? So these are different kind of questions that you can also expect in vocabulary. So with today's session, we have completed all the Latin roots, all the major Latin roots rather, that we can come across. So if you've attended all the 4 vocabulary classes, I would suggest that you keep revising these words once every few days, at least once every week, so that all these words that you have come across will actually become part of your regular dictionary, your vocabulary, right? So that is when it will be very natural when you attend all these competitive exams. You wouldn't really worry about trying to guess the meaning of the word, because you would have already started using these words, so you know them in a more natural fashion, right? So all of you guys, I would hope that you will carry on with this reading habit. Try and learn new words every day, not just restrict learning new words to having a vocabulary class or attending a vocabulary class, but try and go through newspapers, novels if you have the time for it, or magazines. There could be n number of sources. You can pick anything of interest, right? So if you like sports, then go read a sports article. Even there you will find, from good articles, you will find a few new words, right? So anything that will help improve your vocabulary, try and include that as a reading habit. Latin roots starting with the letter R. The first one, and this is probably something that we discussed briefly in one of the earlier classes, reg or rex is king or ruling, right? So what words can we think of? Earlier when we were discussing side, which is to kill, we discussed something called regicide, which is killing a king, right? So regiment. What is a regiment? An army, a king's army, right? So regime, you guys have all probably heard that there was an ex-rulers. There was Hitler's regime, means Hitler's rule was prevalent, right? So rex, the word itself, rex, means king or crown. That is the king's crown, anything that represents power, right? So other words that you can probably think of is regency, right? So all these words come from the same root, reg or rex, and they have something to do with ruling or king. Next, RID or RIS, which is to laugh at somebody, right? So this root or these set of roots are negative in nature. So the words that you can probably think of are ridiculing. When someone's ridiculing a person, what is he doing? He is laughing at his or her expense, right? So same with risible. Risible means something that's so stupid that it is worthy of being laughed at, right? So risible is laughable or ridiculing somebody, right? So you must have probably heard that a person passed derisive remarks against another. Again, derisive means to mock or make fun of somebody, right? So all these are negative. When we were discussing tones in the reading comprehension classes, we saw that a few words will be negative, a few words will be neutral, a few words will be positive. So all these are ridicule, risible, derisive. Another variation of the same word is deride, right? So when you're using it as a verb, you say he is deriding, right? So all these words are negative in nature, that is to make fun of somebody, to laugh at someone's expense. Next, ridge is to be stiff or numb. What can we possibly think of here? You probably all must be thinking of the most common word, which is rigid, right? So if you have a rigid grip, that is, you have a very stiff grip, right? So what else can you think of? There's something called rigor, right? So, or rigor. So this is the UK version and this is the US version, right? So all the Indian competitive exams will follow the UK version, right? So you will probably not find US version, but sometimes you may, right? But both spellings are perfectly acceptable. So what do you mean by rigor? Or you would have heard of rigorous, right? So rigorous is when something is done thoroughly, right? Completely or thoroughly or exhaustively, right? So rigorous is when you do something completely, thoroughly or exhaustively. Alright, then next we have rog or rogat. It means either to ask or stretch out your hand, which again is another variation of asking something. When do you stretch out your hand? When you are pleading or when you are begging for something, right? So rog or rogat is to ask or plead for something. So what can you probably think of there when you're asking somebody? Interrogation, right? In interrogation, the cops will ask those who have been accused of some wrongdoing about what has happened so that they can get more clues to solve the case, right? So that is interrogation. Then there is abrogation or abrogate, which is official cancellation, or it's also called annulment, right? So there is an official order or there is an official law, and when you're abrogating it, you're officially cancelling it. A law or an order or something that is prevalent is now officially cancelled or annulled, right? That is abrogate. Who can do this? Anyone in the, only someone in the judiciary can do this, right? So abrogation is when they are asking people to stop doing something officially, right? Till yesterday it was legal, but today it's illegal. So the law is now saying, the law is now asking people to stop doing that, right? Interrogation. Then we had abrogation. What else can we think of? There is something called rogation, which is prayer by a bunch of saints, right? So prayer by a bunch of saints is called rogation. Next, rupt is to break or destroy. What can you think of? Rupture, right? So when something has been ruptured, it's been broken, right? So you say that that surface has now been ruptured, that is, it's been broken now or destroyed. What else can you think of when something is being interrupted? What is happening? There's a breakage there, right? So there's a continuous motion of something and then it is suddenly interrupted, right? It's also how you get abrupt, right? So abrupt is a sudden stop to something that happens suddenly, right? So again, breaking, there is a break of the earlier instance. What else can you think of? Corrupt also comes from the same root, right? What is corruption? When something is not the way it is supposed to be. So something which has been destroyed from its original state is said to be corrupted state now, right? Let's now move on to the next set of roots. Sanct or sacred, right? So what can you think of? And it means holy, right? So you can probably think of sanctum. What is a sanctum? It's a holy place, It's a temple, it's a mosque, it's a gurudwara, it's any sanctum is a holy place, right? So from the same thing you get sacred, right? So to sanctify is to purify something. To sanctify is to make it holy, that is purifying something, right? You have from this consecrate and desecrate. As you can probably imagine, when you have the prefix de, it's a negative word. When you are trying to disrespect something holy, that is desecration, right? Whereas if you are giving its due respect, that is consecration, right? So all these words have something to do with holiness. Next, sanguine is blood. It's also cheerful. So if someone's said to be in a sanguine mood, that means that person is in a very happy state of mind. How does sanguine mean happy? Because when someone's very happy, someone's very excited, that person's blood will be rushing to the person's face. So the person's cheeks or the person's face will be red, full of blood, right? So if someone's in a sanguine mood, that person is in such a mood that his face is red because of the rush of blood, right? So that is happiness. Sanguine is a happy state of mind. You have something called consanguine. Con from your earlier vocabulary classes is together. Con is together, and sanguine we just saw was blood. So what do you mean by this? Someone who is a blood relation. Someone who is related to you by blood, right? So that is, you guys are coming from the same family. Then you're said to be consanguines. Next, scan is to climb. What can we possibly think of here? Ascend, descend, etc. Right? So to ascend is to go up, to descend is to climb down. SCI is to know, right? So we already again discussed this when we were discussing omni. We said omniscient is someone who knows everything, right? So science itself is knowledge of something. Science also comes from the same root. Science is knowledge of something. Conscious also comes from the same root. When you are aware of what is happening around you, you are in a conscious state of mind. Next, scrib or script is something to do with writing, right? So you know scriptures. Scriptures are those books that were written, right? So those people who write are called scribes. The person is called scribe, and what that person has written is called a scripture, right? It could be a book, it could be whatever, right? So anything that is written is called scripture. Describe or description also come from the same root. Then what else can we think of when we're talking about scribe? Subscribe, right? So you guys have all subscribed to YouTube classes. What does that mean? Again, you have given your written consent to come in and join this particular session, right? So What else can we probably think of? I guess, yeah, these are, you can just extend, right? So you can say a manuscript, for example, also comes from the same root.